It started with whispers in the halls of power. Now, it's a full-blown institutional storm. What began as murmurs behind closed doors has erupted into a political earthquake, shaking the very foundations of the British monarchy. The House of Lords, that age-old symbol of elite discretion and reserved authority, has broken its silence in the most aggressive way possible. Not through quiet disapproval or indirect commentary, but through action. Real, constitutional, historical action. A petition has been launched, not by a public mob, not by a tabloid columnist, but by the very body that has upheld royal traditions for centuries. And this time, the target is unmistakable. Prince Harry, the once beloved son of Diana, now seen by many as the monarchy's greatest defector. The House of Lords isn't reacting to a single scandal. It's not about one interview or a reckless remark. This is about the accumulation of choices, of headlines, of years of tension that have finally boiled over. The catalyst? A televised interview aired mere hours after Harry lost his appeal for publicly funded UK security. The timing couldn't have been worse. To the public, it wasn't just tone-deaf, it was inflammatory. And for the Parliament, it was the final insult. This isn't the first time Prince Harry has faced backlash. But this is different. This isn't the tabloid circus or a family squabble being leaked through palace insiders. This is the British establishment, wielding its institutional weight in a way rarely seen in modern history. When a petition makes its way through the House of Lords, it doesn't do so lightly. It's not designed to spark debate. It's designed to trigger consequences. There's something deeper fueling this storm, an underlying sense that what Harry has done isn't just offensive, it's dangerous. That by walking away from his duties while holding on to his titles, he's created a contradiction too big to ignore. In the past, such contradictions may have been overlooked for the sake of diplomacy or appearances, but not anymore. The political class is tired of pretending. The tide has turned, and what was once whispered quietly is now echoing through Westminster with thunderous force. This isn't about scandal. It's about sovereignty, about the balance of tradition and reform, about whether a man who has publicly criticized the i.e. institution, distanced himself from its obligations, and seemingly profited from its legacy, still deserves to wear its name. And while the public may be split on many royal matters, this petition is uniting voices from all sides, left, right, royalist, and republican. What makes this moment truly seismic is that it's no longer confined to family drama or public opinion. The battle has entered Parliament, the same place where royal successions have been debated, where abdications have been recorded, and where the laws of monarchy are written in ink, not emotion. And the implications stretch far beyond Harry himself. Because if this petition succeeds, it sets a precedent that no title is immune, that even the most famous names in the world can be stripped of their symbolism when they stop living up to its meaning. But this isn't just about punishment. It's about erasing what Harry still holds on to, the title that defines his legacy. Strippy, away the Duke of Sussex title, and what's left of Prince Harry. For years, that title has been more than ceremonial. It's been his shield, his currency, and his brand. In a world obsessed with status, Duke of Sussex isn't just a relic of royal tradition, it's a passport to power. It opens doors in boardrooms, elevates him on red carpets, and cloaks every project he touches with the allure of monarchy. Without it, Harry isn't a prince abroad. He's just another celebrity trying to stay relevant in a world that moves on fast. In Hollywood, perception is everything, and His Royal Highness carries weight that money can't buy. It whispers of prestige, lineage, and a legacy rooted in 1,000 years of British history. Studios don't invite Harry for his acting chops or business acumen. They invite the Duke. That royal mystique sells. It elevates documentaries, podcast deals, book sales. Strip the title, and the curtain falls. Suddenly, it's not a global figure delivering an exposé, it's just Harry, a man with a story and a microphone. And in a crowded market, that makes, all the difference. The Duke of Sussex title doesn't just legitimize him, it anchors him. In a post-royal life filled with controversy, commercial ventures, and global media swings, the title remains the only constant. It's what keeps the public guessing. investors listening, and platforms bidding. Every time Harry appears on a stage or headlines a cause, it's that title that wraps his voice in gravitas. Without it, what he says risks sounding less like a prince and more like a disgruntled exile. That difference is subtle, but in politics, branding, and influence, it's lethal. Parliament sees that clearly. To them, this isn't about personal vendettas or public outcry. It's about consistency, precedent, and protecting the value of what titles represent. Because if someone can walk away from duty, abandon tradition, and still keep the crown's endorsement, what message does that send? Parliament isn't debating the symbolism. They're confronting the reality. Harry's title isn't a name, it's a weapon, one that gives him soft power, global reach, and cultural clout. And from their perspective, that weapon's now pointed at the very institution that gave it to him. And that's where the true danger lies. Not in Harry's statements or lifestyle, but in the contradiction he represents. A man profiting from the very system he spent years tearing down. It's a paradox that's growing harder to defend and even harder to ignore. Because the longer he holds on to the title, the more it looks like hypocrisy. And the more the institution lets it happen, the weaker the title becomes for everyone who still honors it. But just how serious is this threat? To understand, we need to look at the law Parliament is now prepared to wield. A century-old law used against traitors is now being dusted off for a royal prince. Buried in the archives of British constitutional history lies a law forged in the shadows of war. The Titles Deprivation Act of 1917 was never meant to be routine legislation. It was a weapon crafted during the chaos of World War I, aimed squarely at British nobles who turned their backs on the crown by siding with the enemy. Back then, it served one clear purpose: to sever all royal privilege from those who betrayed their nation. It was a razor, used sparingly, and only in moments of grave disloyalty. And for over a century, it remained dormant until now. Parliament isn't reaching for this law out of symbolism or sentiment. They're invoking it with surgical precision, using the same cold logic once reserved for traitorous aristocrats aligned with Germany. What makes this moment extraordinary is that the Titles Deprivation Act wasn't designed for disgruntled family members or tabloid rebels. It was built for those who actively threatened the stability of the realm. And yet, in the eyes of lawmakers today, Prince Harry's public crusade, his interviews, his memoirs, his global media tours now echoes that same spirit of betrayal. The Uyghur law, in its purest form, allows for any peer or royal who has shown disloyalty to be stripped of titles, with approval from both houses of parliament and the sovereign. It's constitutional dynamite, rarely touched, but deadly when activated. In 1917, it was used to erase the honors of royal relatives who supported Germany's war efforts. Their names were struck from the rolls, their legacies severed. And now, in 2025, politicians argue the same principle applies not in military allegiance, but in moral treason. Because what Harry has done, they say, is abandon not just his duties, but the values that his title represents. And if there's any doubt this is more than just theoretical, look no further than the modern precedent, Prince Andrew. After the Epstein scandal rocked the royal house, Andrew was stripped of his military affiliations and public roles. It was swift, brutal, and necessary to protect the crown's image. That wasn't just a public rebuke, it was a warning, a reminder that no one is untouchable, not even the Queen's son. And now that precedent is being sharpened again, not for a scandal rooted in silence, but for one shouted from rooftops across continents. Parliament's stance is clear. This isn't just about politics, it's about principle. In their view, Harry's repeated attacks on the institution, while continuing to benefit from its title, amounts to a betrayal of the same gravity, if not worse. Because, unlike others, before him, Harry hasn't disappeared in shame. He's built an empire on the very ashes he lit. And that, lawmakers argue, is the ultimate contradiction. So no, this isn't a bluff. This isn't a stunt for headlines. The legal grounds are real. The history is on their side. And the machinery is already in motion. The Title Deprivation Act is no longer just a relic of war. It's the spine of the petition now gripping Westminster. And it carries with it the full weight of British history. But while the law forms the spine of the petition, it's public rage that's giving it life. He doesn't represent us anymore. That one quote shattered the illusion. It came not from a palace official, nor a high-profile commentator, but from a retired pensioner in Sussex. A woman who had once watched Princess Diana with pride now voiced what millions across the country were beginning to feel. In just 7 words, she captured the quiet fury boiling beneath the surface, a betrayal so deep that even the most empathetic supporters were turning away. Because this wasn't about leaving the monarchy. This was about profiting from its destruction while still demanding to wear its crown. In towns from Sussex to Scotland, something rare was unfolding. The UK, long known for its reserved tolerance, was rising in collective anger. The petition to strip Prince Harry of his title wasn't some fringe protest. It was a national cry. Within days, signatures surged into the tens of thousands. And they weren't just names on paper, they were declarations of disillusionment. These were voices once silent, now roaring with frustration, calling for accountability, not from enemies of the crown, but from one of its own. The numbers were damning. Recent polls showed that 62% of Brits now support the removal of Harry's TT title. Among older voters, that number climbs to over 70%. But the real shock came from the center-left. Traditionally more forgiving toward Harry and Meghan, even they had begun to turn. Not because of his departure, but because of what he did after. Because you can't claim to escape the toxicity of royalty while cashing in on its golden seal. You can't cry privacy while publishing memoirs, producing Netflix specials, and hosting interviews that peel back the institution with surgical venom. And what once was curiosity has turned to contempt. This wasn't the fairy tale rebellion people had rooted for. It was beginning to look like exploitation. To many, Harry wasn't challenging the monarchy, he was milking it. And that betrayal cut deeper than any interview or book ever could. Because the public wanted truth, not manipulation. They wanted growth, not spectacle. And instead, they got a performance. One that smeared family, tradition, and country for personal gain. This wave of resentment wasn't driven by palace insiders or political operatives. It came from the people. From the pubs and bus stops, dinner tables and online forums. It wasn't confined to royalists or constitutional purists. It swept across ideological lines. What united them wasn't loyalty to the crown. It was a shared sense of being used. Because when someone wears a royal title while bashing the royal institution, it feels less like honesty and more like hypocrisy. And now, that sentiment has taken root. It's not just disappointment. It's rejection. The same people who once saw him as the boy who walked behind his mother's coffin now see him as the man who walked away and never looked back. The public has spoken, and they've spoken with clarity. He doesn't represent us. Not anymore. Not with that title. And just as the public gathers its voice, Parliament sharpens its tools because Harry crossed one line too many. Royals aren't meant to play politics. Harry didn't just play. He ignited fires overseas. There's an unspoken rule that binds the crown to its people. Neutrality. Royals don't campaign. They don't endorse. They don't provoke. Their power rests in silence, their influence in restraint. But Harry shattered that expectation with a boldness that stunned both sides of the Atlantic. In America, he wasn't just a royal on holiday, he was a prince with a microphone, a platform, and a message that struck at the heart of two nations' values. What began as whispers of advocacy soon morphed into full-throated political commentary. And it didn't stop there. When Harry criticized the First Amendment, the very foundation of American democracy, it was more than a misstep. It was a declaration, one that revealed how deeply he had crossed the line from public figure to political firebrand. Aligning with partisan groups, backing controversial causes, inserting himself into national debates, he became a figure not of royalty, but of division. And every time he did it with the shield of his title. The Duke of Sussex wasn't speaking as a private citizen. He was speaking as a royal. And that's where everything began to unravel. Members of Parliament didn't take long to react. They called it out for what it was: title laundering. Using the credibility of monarchy to amplify personal opinions. To many, it felt like betrayal wrapped in velvet. Royals are expected to stay above the fray, to represent all sides by endorsing none. Harry's actions not only breached that code, they trampled it. And in doing so, he exposed the crown to the kind of political heat it was never meant to endure. For the monarchy, built on balance and longevity, this wasn't just uncomfortable, it was dangerous. Because Harry didn't just express views, he turned the title into a megaphone. And while fans in Hollywood and progressive circles cheered him on, lawmakers in London saw something far more disturbing. They saw a foreign duke attempting to influence domestic and international policy, debates. A man wearing the crown's signature while criticizing the constitutional fabric of both the UK and its closest ally. And with each public appearance, the tension grew. Because the more Harry spoke, the more he blurred the line between activism and authority. To Parliament, the stakes couldn't be higher. This wasn't a celebrity scandal, it was a constitutional threat. A royal title used as political currency abroad chips away at the very neutrality that sustains the monarchy's legitimacy. It opens the floodgates for ideological warfare tied to inherited power. And that's a scenario no one in Westminster is willing to tolerate. So now, as Harry continues to navigate this minefield of advocacy and identity, Parliament is drawing its line. The title cannot be both a crown and a campaign slogan. And if Harry refuses to choose, they will choose for him. But while Parliament fights the political war, the palace watches in silence, and that silence speaks volumes. No statements, no defenses. Just silence, as if the crown is letting the axe fall on its own. In the face of mounting political heat, global headlines, and a petition that's grown into a constitutional firestorm, the royal family has chosen its weapon, carefully, silence. And that silence isn't accidental. It's not weakness, it's strategy. King Charles, a monarch molded by decades of cautious diplomacy, knows better than to confront a storm with bare hands. He's not rushing to Harry's defense. He's not making calls to quiet the press. He's simply watching as the walls close in, ensuring that when the blow lands, it won't carry his fingerprints. This isn't cowardice, it's optics. Because if the monarchy is to survive the chaos Harry left behind, it must emerge looking untouched, neutral, measured, above the fray. And right now, Parliament is doing exactly what Charles can't afford to. They're taking the heat, delivering the blow, writing the chapter that the crown needs written without ever needing to pick up the pen. That separation is vital. If the institution appears to punish its own out of personal spite, it fractures the delicate image of duty and impartiality. But if the government does it guided by law, backed by public outrage, the crown remains untarnished. And behind those gilded palace gates, the silence speaks louder than any press release ever could. Prince William, once inseparable from his younger brother, now offers no public objection, no subtle pushback. Sources close to the palace confirm what many suspected. William supports the petition. Not loudly, not emotionally, but deliberately. Because to him, this isn't just about family. It's about the crown's credibility. The title Harry still clings to isn't just a name, it's a brand. One that William believes has been dragged through the mud of memoirs, media spectacles, and televised betrayals. And in his eyes, that brand must be protected, even if it means endorsing the removal of his brother's last royal tie. It's a brutal calculation, but one rooted in the monarchy's survival instinct. The crown doesn't weep publicly. It doesn't argue. It endures. And to endure in a modern world where public trust is fragile and scandal spreads like wildfire, the institution must remain cold, steady, and removed from personal entanglements. That's why the palace isn't stepping in. That's why Charles remains composed. They've handed Harry over to the system, knowing full well what the outcome will be. Because if the monarchy is seen as defending a man who has repeatedly tried to dismantle it from abroad, it loses more than public favor. It loses its grip on legitimacy. So instead, they let the legal gears grind. They let Parliament play executioner while they preserve the illusion of familial dignity. It's a silent sacrifice, not of mercy, but of reputation. And the message is clear. The crown will not bleed for the one who tried to wound it. And the deeper the system cuts, the more fragile Harry's brand becomes with everything he's built on the line. From Netflix deals to podcast intros, it was never just Harry and Meghan. It was the Duke and Duchess brand. And that brand wasn't just valuable, it was the engine behind their entire post-royal empire. Every contract they signed, every interview they gave, every show they produced, leaned heavily on the weight of those titles. Without them, the shine would have faded fast. Because the world wasn't interested in hearing from just another celebrity couple. The world wanted royalty. It wanted the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, rebels of the crown, with a story to sell and a pedigree to profit from. And they knew it. The Netflix deal alone, rumored to be worth over $100 million, wasn't signed with Harry Windsor. It was signed with royalty. And when Spotify welcomed them to its podcast platform, it wasn't a personal diary they were buying, it was access to a royal narrative, one draped in scandal, legacy, and global fascination. The value was never just in what they had to say. It was in who they were, or more specifically, what they were called. Titles sold the story before a word was even spoken. But as the public caught on, the backlash came with force. What was once praised as brave truth-telling began to look like title trafficking. Critics accused the couple of clinging to the very institution they condemned, of demanding privacy while chasing press, of stepping back from royal duties, yet never from royal branding. Meghan's children's book, Harry's memoir, their documentary branding, it was all wrapped in Sussex packaging. The contradiction became deafening. How could they claim to break free from the monarchy while profiting from its image? And it didn't stop with them. Even their children were introduced with titles intact, paraded in royal terminology, while the couple demanded to be left alone. For many, it was the final insult. A family supposedly retreating from the institution's grip was still leveraging its name for influence, visibility, and financial gain. The branding was clear, deliberate, and lucrative. But now, the very foundation of that model is under threat. Because if the title goes, if Parliament strips Duke of Sussex from Harry's identity, it all falls apart. Without Sussex, the illusion dissolves. The podcasts lose their royal sparkle. The documentaries become just another celebrity confession. The memoir reads less like royal insight and more like personal grievance. Their brand, built so meticulously around their departure, depends entirely on the perception that they're still tethered to the throne. Sever that thread, and what's left is noise without nobility, stories without symbolism, fame without the fairy tale. And the markets will feel it. Hollywood may have embraced them, but it did so because of the crown's shadow behind them. Remove that, and their standing changes overnight. They become ex-royals without official recognition. Former insiders turned outsiders, and in the ruthless world of media and brand equity, perception is everything. And as the walls close in, one final thread remains. Will Parliament really go through with it? The crown won't exile him, but it will erase him. Not with fury, with formality. If the petition succeeds, Harry won't be cast into exile. He won't be paraded in shame or banished with public spectacle. Instead, the undoing will be quiet, legal, precise. A line in Parliament, a vote in silence. And then, just like that, His Royal Highness the Duke of Sussex will become Mr. Harry Windsor. A name with no crest, no ceremonial weight, no diplomatic standing. Not a prince, not a peer, just a man. And in the world he helped build, that change isn't symbolic, it's seismic. Because that title wasn't just a formality. It was his identity, his last tie to the institution that raised him, protected him, and yes, hurt him. But in stripping it away, the crown delivers its most devastating judgment yet. It doesn't scream, it doesn't strike, it simply removes him, quietly, officially, and forever. The royal privileges disappear. There will be no invitations with embossed gold, no diplomatic greetings on global stages, no ceremonial bows. The world may still remember who he was, but the monarchy will no longer acknowledge it. And without that royal thread, Harry's identity collapses. He's no longer a prince walking through rebellion, he's a celebrity chasing relevance. The stories, the memoirs, the documentaries, they all hinge on that royal context. But once that's gone, the narrative changes. No longer is he the insider telling painful truths. He becomes the outsider, screaming at gates already closed. The power in his voice loses its echo. The platform he built, shaken. The aura surrounding him shattered. Not by scandal, but by silence. This isn't just about legality. It's about legacy. Parliament isn't just voting on a title, they're delivering a verdict. A final statement on years of tension, division, and betrayal. They are saying what many have thought, but few dared speak aloud. That you cannot torch the house and expect to keep the keys. That royalty is not just lineage, it's loyalty. And in choosing self over service, Harry crossed a line the institution can no longer ignore. This is their answer. Cold, final, and irreversible. And when the dust settles, it won't be a prince who remains. It will be a man, standing alone, stripped of his crown, and shielded only by memories of a world that no longer claims him. The monarchy won't gloat. It won't retaliate. It will move on, slowly but surely, as it always has, because that's the brutal poetry of royalty. It doesn't stop for anyone, not even its own. And as the doors of Westminster close, one truth remains when you walk away from the crown. It walks away from you. Drop your thoughts in sections. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe. And we will see you in the next one.